Hi, my love. Welcome back to another episode. I've been talking a lot lately about this concept of outgrowing. And I think a lot of us, especially millennial women, but a lot of us in general, feel like, if we're honest with ourselves, that we were kind of sold this like package almost. Like you will do these things, X, Y, and Z, and then you'll get to this future state and you will feel happy, you'll feel fulfilled, you'll feel good, like your life will be meaningful, all of those things. And so just trusting in that, we went along with that, some of us more than others, and then have kind of arrived at this point, and it happens at different phases of people's lives, at different moments in their lives, with different milestones, but with this realization that, oh, I've spent all of these years building this thing, doing this thing, like building this life that actually from the outside looks so beautiful, like looks exquisite from the outside. But it doesn't feel like anything. I don't feel happy. I don't feel fulfilled. I don't have any energy. I don't feel good in myself. I don't feel alive. So what's gone wrong here, basically? And I've been making some specific content around this because I think it's so important to talk about. And this is the work that I do with my clients. They come to me once they have this realization. It happens at all different ages. Some of them in their 50s, some of them even older, some of them much younger, some my age, some younger than me. And it happens at different moments where people realize I've spent all of this time and energy and effort building this life, doing these things. You know, buying the house, having the mortgage, meeting the perfect partner, maybe having kids, like the whole white picket fence thing, getting the job out of school, climbing the corporate ladder, like going to uni, doing your masters, getting the job, you know, working your way up through the ranks. But for what, some of these things? And a lot of people have done these for a lot of years and then just kind of cottoned on to the fact that this mystical, magical feeling isn't there, and it probably, if it's not there already, it's probably not further down that trajectory. So then what, you know? And it's a very difficult thing to talk about in some ways because it's a very difficult thing to admit to yourself because it's an extremely painful thing. And of course it completely exists as this thing called the sunk cost fallacy, where because you've already invested a certain amount of time and energy and effort and money especially, that you may as well just keep going on with it, you know what I mean? And I feel like I know of people that have studied these incredibly complicated things, studied biomed and gone to medical school and then specialized in some form of some sort of doctor and then just maybe don't really love it, you know, but it's been so many years and so much money that it's I couldn't possibly start over, so I may as well just keep doing what I'm doing. And so I created one specific piece of content about this on TikTok and Instagram about, you know, we're not actually obliged to just keep going with all of these things that we have done, apart from if you have children, that's something, of course, it's in a different category altogether. But things outside of that, you're not obliged to stay in your job, you're not obliged to stay in your relationship, you're not obliged to stay in the city that you're living, the country that you're living in, any of these things, just because that's what you've always done and just because you've put a lot of time and energy into it and just because you spent a lot of money to get to that place. And the fact that you've built something very beautiful, a very beautiful life up until this point, instead of letting it be something that causes you despair, actually it's a nice sign that, of course, if you've built something beautiful once, you can absolutely build something beautiful again and again and again and again and again. Many, many, many more times, you know. And that actually is what I think quite a delightful thought, really, because then it creates so much freedom. So I posted this piece of content and then I got one very beautiful comment actually on the video on TikTok. And this person said, that's a nice concept, but how do you know if you're not just doing this thing where the grass is always greener on the other side? And it's you're in this situation now and your life might look good, you know, from the outside. Maybe it looks good from the inside, but it doesn't feel good. And it's just normal. So how do you know if you're just, you know, the grass is greener because it's something different and it's something new, but actually when you get there, you'll just still feel just the same, just as empty, just as numb, just as unfulfilled, just as energyless, just as beige, all of those things. And they said in this comment, like, is that feeling of like outgrowing your life, outgrowing a beautiful life was the specific thing of that reel. Is that feeling a sign to go and find more fertile soil somewhere else? Or is it actually a sign to water the dry grass beneath you? And I think that's such a brilliant question. So I said to her that I would record a whole podcast episode on it, because it is a question worth asking. And I think it also ties into this thing of like, are we running away because we keep, because we feel free to go and start different things and go to different places and do different things instead of just doing what we have always done? And I think there's multiple different parts to this, but there's two specific things that I really want to cover here. The first thing is that if you're honest, probably you have already been watering the soil beneath you. And that's actually the first place to start. So there's also two parts to this. First of all, sometimes we just get complacent in our life because life is normal life, right? And we forget to be grateful for the things that we have. We forget to water the things that are currently in our life because they're so normal that we don't notice them, It's like you don't notice the people that you live with aging because you see them every day. And like if you go away for a year and you come back and you see your parents, it's like surprising how different they look. But when you see your parents every week, you don't notice those things. And it's the same with our lives, like we get used to things become normal, and so we don't put as much energy and effort and appreciation towards the people and the situations and the things that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. That's one part of it, and that may be happening. That probably is happening in some way. The other side of that thing is that a lot of people, especially if you are a very empathetic, sensitive woman, you're probably living in a state of hopefulness that if you are evolving and you are growing and you're putting effort into that the people and the situations and the environments around you will also evolve. And we stay in this state of like perpetual optimism, perpetual hopefulness, because we can see the potential of something. We can see the potential of a person. We can see the potential of a role at work, something in your job, the potential of the house that you live in, the city that you live in. And because there is some potential there that we see, we kind of latch onto that and then live in this state of perpetual optimism that that thing will unfold. Whereas actually, a lot of the time, many, many, many years have passed and nothing has really unfolded. So it's worth examining those two things when you're considering this question. Should I just put more effort to watering the grass beneath me, or should I move to more fertile soil? So the first two things to ask yourself would be, am I actually neglecting the soil beneath me? Like if you don't make time for your partner, if you're not like appreciative of them, if you don't put some effort to making them feel loved in the way that they understand love and vice versa, and you're not watering that thing specifically, then it's probably not going to grow. So are you already watering that thing? Are you going to your job, whatever it is, and actually like passionate there, like is the energy that you bring to that place uplifting? Is it passionate? Are you like, what's the word? Like, do you do things in anticipation? Like, are you proactive? Are you a nice co-worker? All of those things. So are you actually watering the grass where you are? Honestly, that's the first question to answer. And then the second question to answer would be, are you just living in a state of perpetual hope and optimism? And it's nice to be in that state, right? That is one of the gifts of people like us. But how long has it been going on for, really? And if it's been for more than a year, I don't know, that's a long time, like that's a long time. And then these states of perpetual optimism can go on for decades, really. And you don't want to be in that position where you get to a place in your life like 10, 20, 30 years down the track and you think, oh, actually nothing really ever changed. So that's the first thing to look at there. What is the situation of this dry grass beneath you, and why is it dry grass? And is it actually dry grass? What are the reasons behind it being dry grass? And then the next thing to think about is, what are the greener pastures that you could think of, right? So if you look around, if you look at your current situation, your beautiful life that you've outgrown, what would feel greener? What would that look like? Would it look like moving to a different country? Would it look like moving to a different city? Would it look like leaving a relationship that you're in that maybe you know that you should have left maybe a year ago, you know? Is it something to do with the dynamic in the friendship group that you know is just making you into not a very nice person, because we do become like the people that we spend the most time with? Is it a situation in your workplace that is just you're not going anywhere? Is it a job that's not going anywhere? Something that you feel completely passionless about, that you feel nothing about? And so if the area where you are is not that inspiring, what would you actually want to do? You know, like what kind of partner would you actually want to be with? What kind of person would you actually want to be? What kind of energy levels do you actually want to have? What kind of things do you actually want to do in your day? What does that look like? And it's worth getting very extremely clear on this. It's worth making a vision board. When I make my vision boards with my clients, I like to break things into 5 categories. So health and wellness, your work or your business, whatever it is that you do, your career, I guess, relationships and family, passions and hobbies, and travel, because I think that's also a really important thing. And then for each of those categories, go and find images, or like actually first write them down, but like one achievable thing in that category over like maybe the next year time frame, and one very, very extremely audacious thing in that category. So for example, if you don't do any exercise, maybe an achievable goal for in your health and wellness category might be to, you know, start going to some local yoga classes. And you could find an image for that. And then an audacious goal might be to like run a half marathon within a year. That would be something relatively audacious that would require you to actually commit to training properly and actually changing your life in some ways. So for each of those categories, you can do those things. If you want more help with this, you can contact me and I can help you make one and I can help you bring it to life. But yeah, figure out what your greener pastures actually are, because if you don't know, then you're really you're keeping yourself stuck, because you don't like where you are and you don't know where you're going, and then there's nothing to do there, you know, that's just like a completely dead zone. Then the next thing to do beyond that, and I was saying this sending this in a voice note to a really good friend of mine the other day, and actually this is the advice that I would give to anybody in my life, myself included and my clients included. First, you need to water yourself. And what that means is either you stay and you water, or you go and explore the greener pastures, but either way, you actually want to be a more evolved version of yourself than you are now. Especially if there's going to be difficult questions that you're going to have to answer, because sometimes the version of us now just doesn't know, you know. And this friend that I was talking to, she's been traveling a lot. She's been traveling maybe the last 2 years, kind of going around, and she's like earning money while she travels, teaching a language and having a lot of different experiences and having a lot of different ideas for different businesses and meeting different people that inspire different things, and just like feeling very inspired on the one hand, but feeling very ungrounded on the other hand, and feeling just very complicated things. She doesn't actually know where to put her energy, what to do, what of these business opportunities to pursue, where should she be in the world, what should she be doing, should she be spending time with friends, should she be spending time by herself. There's a lot of difficult questions to answer. What does she actually want to do with her life? Like, what would be meaningful? Like, difficult things to answer. And so I said to her, like, yeah, maybe you can't answer those questions, you know? But then if you know that you can't answer the questions, your job actually becomes to become a person that can answer those questions. And not by forcing yourself to like journal about these things for 200 hours until you find out what the answer is. We do that by making these kind of micro adjustments in our life, and sometimes like macro big adjustments, but often micro ones are all that are necessary to make yourself a different person in a different state of mind, with a different attitude also, if you can. And that version of you will have much more answers than the version of you now. And I like to approach this from a few different ways. If what you're eating is less than ideal, that's that, and also how you're moving, your exercise, they're the two fastest, easiest levers to pull, I would say, because they have the biggest impact on how you feel and what your energy levels are. And the version of you that doesn't have any energy doesn't have many answers, and not clear, good answers. The version of you that has a lot of energy they have a lot better answers, you know, they have a lot more opportunities available to them because they have more energy available to them. And that's the currency of everything. We can talk about it in the sense of physiological energy, which is what I'm talking about in the sense of now, but also energy in terms of like the stuff that makes up the whole cosmos. You know what I mean? Like we want more, we always want more of it. The more, the better. The more alive you are. And that's the state that we all want to be in. That's the state from which you can live a very extraordinary life. So the fastest ways to influence how much energy you have is what are you eating, how are you moving, and how are you sleeping? Those are the three things. And I can very, very confidently talk about this because this has been my life's exploration, right? Like I studied health science in uni. I did a master's of clinical exercise physiology. I worked in hospitals and rehab centers. I then lived in like a community of Olympic athletes, cyclists in Spain, and I saw how they lived. I had a lot to do with how they lived there. And then like various other different explorations around that, working with my clients, and then now myself. And of course, I'm always my own biggest experiment, and I'm in my own biggest experiment now, training 5 hours per day in Kalari, this ancient sword fighting martial art in India, which has taught me more than anything else, actually, like how vitally important your sleep is, your movement is, and how and what you eat is. So if you're eating a lot of ultra-processed food, if you're eating a lot of sugar, if you're eating a lot of refined carbohydrates, I would put in that category bread, pasta, rice, too much rice, crackers, biscuits, cakes, any of those things, I would put in that category. If you are smoking, drinking alcohol, if you're drinking a lot of coffee, that's also something that I've recently really discovered a lot about. Those things need to be dealt with realistically, because you're never going to be an incredibly vibrant person with all of those things. Unfortunately, we wish. Of course, you can indulge in some things occasionally. You can't be doing those things all of the time, not every day. Also, if you're not moving much, if you're not walking a lot, I would say at least 10K steps a day is what I get my clients to do. 10K steps a day, plus also some other form of like movement on top of that. Ideally, something very like activating, something very empowering, something that's building a lot of strength in you. This looks different for everyone. I would highly recommend everybody do a martial art. I love Ashtanga yoga for this. Any other form of any other form of martial art. Some of my clients do HIIT workouts. Some of them go to the gym. A lot of them do running, rock climbing. Find what it is for you. Some of them do swimming, it doesn't have to be something extremely conventional. I'm living in India, like literally jumping around in a pit, like hitting people with sticks. So it can be whatever you want. And do those things, like walk a lot and get your energy moving a lot. You want a lot of this like strong yang fire energy in the system to generate energy and to move it around your body. And then you also need restoration. So sleep is a big, big, huge one. Sleep, I wake up at 4 o'clock every day. So sleep for me has been it's really non-negotiable. And I tried to live this lifestyle, getting away with less sleep, and it was extraordinarily, radically unsuccessful. So I learned that lesson very quickly. In that category also, I would put some other forms of like incredibly restorative relaxation, which would be anything properly restorative. So no phone, no TV, no podcast, ideally no music unless it's something like very calming, like maybe binaural beats or something. But for this, I love like yin yoga or yoga nidra. If you can tidy up those areas of your life, you are just going to have a lot more energy. And of course, there are many, 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 many other areas of your life and things that you can do to enhance how you feel and change who you are as a person and evolve who you are as a person. But those three categories, if you can just tidy those up, that will already have a huge impact on how you feel. And when you feel different, you know different. And when you know different, you make different decisions. Not only that, but you also, first of all, you notice different things in your life, because we have a lot of opportunities in our life that most of the time we just don't notice because we're too tired. we're fatigued, we're exhausted, we're busy, we've got things with our partner, we've got things with our kids, we've got work, we've got trying to balance the social life, trying to like exercise, trying to do all of those things. So a lot of the time our brain is actually just automatically filtering out a lot of opportunities that come to us because we don't have the energy for them. We don't have the capacity for them. We can't pursue them. So there's no point in bringing them to our attention because that's just disappointing. You know, it makes you feel bad about yourself. So our brain does us a favor, and quote unquote, and just doesn't bring them to us so that we don't feel disappointed that we can't pursue them. You will start noticing those things more and more. It's not because they're coming to you more and because there's more of them, although there may actually be more of them, but it's mainly just because you're actually starting to notice them now. And along with that, you'll actually have enough energy to actually act on them. And what that means is that just lots more doors will open up to you. You know, when you're somebody that has energy and has the capacity to be able to respond to things that your life is bringing you, very unpredictable, magical things happen in your life. But it's not really unpredictable, it's not magical, it's just it's just what happens when you have more energy. So conversations will lead places, and they're conversations that you wouldn't have had otherwise because you didn't have the energy for them. They're places that you went to that you just wouldn't have gone to otherwise because you didn't have the energy for it. It's opportunities that come to you because you've been open to things that you wouldn't have been open to before because you didn't have the energy. So this is a huge part also in answering this question of like how to know whether to water the grass beneath you or how to know whether to go. Either way, you're going to want to be a more radiant, well-resourced person, right? A more alive person, a more delightful person, a more optimistic, you know, more trusting in life person. And so when we put our effort then into not so much necessarily like really trying to figure out the answer to the question, like trying a lot of like mental effort and energy to like, what's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do? Take all of that energy and instead of putting it there, just put it towards like changing the way that you eat, changing the way that you move, like moving a lot more, making sure that you're sleeping better, like really prioritizing how much you sleep. And it will mean making sacrifices in other areas of your life for a period of time, but it's really, really worth it. And then that version of you will know much more. They're much, much, much wiser. They are much wiser. They are much, much, much more brilliant. They're much, much more delightful to spend time with. You will notice people going out of their way to spend more time with you and to have conversations with you and to interact with you because it creates this specific type of magnetism, this specific type of radiance that's really, really uplifting and delightful to be around. And people are going to want to be around you. And from this place, from that person that's different to who you are now, you will have a completely different type of insight about your life. You'll have a completely different understanding of whether there are areas of your current beautiful life now that you feel like you've outgrown, that you can realize that you've outgrown them because you haven't lifted them up to your level, and you actually can. You can. Sometimes we can't. Of course, we can't force people to change. We can't force the people in our life to like heal or evolve or any of these things. You know, we can't force people in our life to become spiritual. We can't force people in our life to become healthy. It really has the opposite effect in my experience. And I have tried to do this before and it really doesn't work. I've had to learn that lesson multiple times, unfortunately. So we can evolve ourselves. We can grow ourselves. We can become this like more magnetic, more delightful person, not because we want to delight other people, but delightful to ourselves. And the natural byproduct of that is that we become more delightful to everyone around us. And so we can only do that work on ourselves. And then the people around us will either not be interested in that, and we can't force them to be. We can try, or we can try and inspire them, or we can try and influence them, or try and guide them, but we cannot force them. And if they don't want to, what are you going to do? You've got three choices. You can stay where you are now, which that would be very sad. You can try and force them and it won't work. You can try and inspire them and hopefully that will work. And then if you do those things, then you've got more information. And if none of them worked, then you either stay, which again would be very sad. And at some point, life will give you a situation that makes you move, because life doesn't like us to be stagnant for too long. Or you can go on to something greener, you know, it's just like a sign. It's a very clear signal. we can very clearly see the trajectories in front of us if we're honest with ourselves. So if you're not on a good trajectory with a person or a situation or a job or any of those things, like unless something drastic changes, the trajectory isn't going to change. So you can be the one that steps off that trajectory into something else. So those are your options, you know what I mean? And so if you are evolving yourself and you are also watering these people and places and situations and things around you, and they're not growing, then what are you going to do? Just like keep watering like an empty garden bed? Like that's, you know, and we do. That's the funny thing. We do. That's the thing I was talking about at the start of the episode, about living in this state of like perpetual optimism and perpetual hope. But at some point, you just have to admit that the garden bed's not growing anything. And maybe you would be better spent going and planting a new garden and watering it and seeing what happens then. Because we think that it's hard work to build a new life. And in a lot of ways, it is hard work to build a new life. You know, it was hard work to build this one. It's probably going to be hard work to build the next one. But what else are you going to do? You know, we have energy. We want to spend it. That's the delight of being a human. So you may as well spend all that energy on making the most gloriously wonderful, tropical, delightful garden instead of just watering a dead garden bed. And that's how you know. You just experiment. That's how I've lived my whole life. You just have to experiment. You experiment, you experiment. You live in hope and optimism. And you put that in misguided places sometimes for a really long time. And then at some moment you gather it back to yourself. And then you put it in new places and you build new things. And then you meet a whole new people. You meet a whole new community. You get to do things that you've never in your life imagined that you would do. Like sometimes I have these like glitches in my own matrix, not to use that awful phrase, but like 2 days ago, I was training, obviously, as I do every day, and we were doing short stick training, and I was training with my training partner, and we were just doing this move where we like both jump into the air and we like slam our sticks into each other, and we're just like fighting, like hitting each other sticks so hard with our sticks. And then I just had this thing of like, what on earth am I doing? Like, this is such a funny way to spend my time. Like, I think back to moments in my life where at this time I would be sitting in the most miserable office that didn't even have a single window, answering calls from angry people, typing notes into the thing, like just, and now I'm just like jumping around, like hitting sticks with somebody in India in this clay pit with all of these weapons around me and all of these people, and like, I just think like, how funny, you know, like, there's really no rules. You get to just make it up. Your greener pastures can be as absurd as you want. Like mine is pretty absurd right now, but I love it. So this is my very long answer to that question. Of course, this is difficult work. Like it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. And that's why it is helpful to have people to guide you. This is why I love this work with my clients. This is why I offer on this podcast, like all of these podcasts. And this is why I also offer, if you need support with this, I will love to support you. You know, this is my greatest passion. You can figure it out on your own. I don't doubt that for a second. But it's much easier when you have somebody that's walked the path before you to guide you. So make the pastures green either way, whether they're the ones between your feet or the ones that you're going to. Like, keep them green. Don't let them be dry. And I wish you the best of luck on your adventures to greener pastures. Love you guys.